The training ground was dusty and rough, built between cracked stone walls and burnt trees. The war had left this planet broken, its people scattered, its cities ruined. But here, a group of alien survivors had gathered to train, and watching them all was a human, tall, quiet, with a sharp gaze and a scar across his cheek. They called him Master Thorn, the only human to ever be trusted with alien combat training. He didn't speak much, didn't smile either, but when he gave an order, every trainee obeyed, except one. She was always sitting in the far corner, silent, her thin arms wrapped around her knees. Her skin was pale blue, cracked in places, and her left leg dragged when she walked. The other trainees whispered about her, calling her broken, waste, and worse. Some even laughed when she tripped over her own feet. But Thorn never said a word. One afternoon, while the sun burned low in the red sky, he called for sparring. Pairs formed quickly, strong aliens, fast ones, smart ones. And again, the girl in the corner was left alone. Thorn glanced at her, then pointed. "You," he said, voice deep and rough. "Step forward." The others turned, confused. She looked up slowly, her large gray eyes wide. "Me?" she whispered. "Now," he replied, not shouting, but his tone was final. She stood, her body shaking. Her left leg barely moved, but she limped forward, stopping in front of him. He looked down at her, then tossed her a wooden practice blade. She barely caught it, her fingers weak and slow. "Fight," he said, and turned away. Her opponent stepped forward, a tall, green-scaled boy with strong arms and fast feet. He smirked. "This will be easy." She said nothing, just raised the blade, her hands trembling. The fight lasted 6 seconds. She was knocked down in 2, dropped the blade in 3, and hit the dirt hard in 6. Laughter filled the air, but Thorn didn't stop it. He simply watched her from the side, arms crossed. The girl didn't cry, didn't look up. She just lay there, breathing hard. Then, slowly, she pushed herself up. On one arm, her lip was bleeding, her leg twisted under her. But she stood, picked up the blade again, and looked at him. "I'm not done," she whispered. The laughter stopped. Thorn gave a small nod, then walked away. That night, after everyone else had left, she stayed behind, sitting on the dirt, staring at the stars above. Thorn returned, carrying 2 small cups of water. He handed her one without a word. She took it, her hands still shaking. "Why did you choose me?" she asked, barely audible. "I'm not strong, I'm not fast, I can't even walk properly." Thorn sat beside her on a stone, watching the fire in the center of camp. He didn't answer at first, then said, "Because you got back up?" She looked at him, confused. "That's not enough to win a fight." "No," he agreed. "But it's how you start winning." She went quiet again, but this time her eyes didn't look down. They stayed up, watching the firelight flicker across the dirt. He stood to leave, but paused. "If you come tomorrow, be ready," he said. "For what?" she asked. "For pain," he replied, "but also progress." Then he walked away into the dark. The girl sat there for a long time. Her body ached, her heart was heavy. But inside her chest, for the first time in a long while, a small light flickered. She wasn't strong, not yet, but someone had seen something in her. Something not even she believed was real. The fire crackled, the stars blinked above, and the silent one in the corner finally whispered to herself, "I will come back." The morning air was sharp and cold, dust swirling in the wind as the sun crawled above the broken cliffs. The girl came early, limping across the cracked training ground before anyone else arrived. Her breath came in clouds, her small hands clenched into fists. She stood alone, waiting, not sure if she had misunderstood the human's words from the night before. But then, from the shadows of the old storage unit, he stepped out. Thorn was already dressed for training, his boots silent on the dry ground, He carried no blade, just a long metal pole he tossed her way. She caught it clumsily. The weight. Tipping her sideways, he said nothing, only walked to the center of the field and pointed to a line drawn in the dirt. She followed, dragging her foot behind her, and stood across from him. He moved without warning, striking low, fast, like lightning. She didn't even try to block. Just dropped, hitting the dirt hard again. Pain screamed in her hip. Her shoulder burned from the fall. Thorn circled her like a predator. His voice calm. Every time you fall, you get up. She pushed herself to her knees, groaning. He hit. Again, from the side, she rolled too late, the pole striking her ribs with a dull crack. This time, she cried out, "You still breathing?" He asked, his voice unreadable. She coughed once, then nodded. Then again, he said, and backed up. It went on like that. Hit after hit, fall after fall, until her arms couldn't lift the stick anymore. Until her legs folded under her, and she lay still on the ground. Mud clung to her clothes, blood dripped from her chin, and her eyes were full of silent tears. Thorn stood over her, breathing steady. "You're not fighting me," he said. "You're fighting everything inside you that says you're not." "Enough?" She didn't answer, only looked at him through heavy eyes. The sky had turned gold by then, and the others had begun to gather in the distance, watching, whispering. But none of them dared to laugh today. One of the trainees, a wide-shouldered alien named Rack, called out, "She can't even stand." "Master, this is pointless." Thorn didn't look at him, just replied, "She stands because she chooses to." The girl's arms shook as she planted the pole beside her. Using it to rise, her legs trembled, her back bent. But she got up. Rack scoffed. "She's weak. She's still here." Thorn said, voice flat, "Which is more than most of you can say." Rack stepped forward, angry now. "You're wasting your time on her," he growled. "She won't survive a real battle." Thorn turned to him slowly. "Then prove it," he said, and tossed Rack a wooden blade. The girl looked up, startled, her mouth opening to protest, but Thorn's voice came low. "No excuses." Rack charged, blade raised, confident in his size and strength. The girl barely lifted her stick, too slow, too tired, but she moved her feet. Not a way to ward him. She took the hit on her shoulder and swung blindly. The stick struck Rack's thigh, not hard, but enough to surprise him. She stumbled, gasping, and fell to her knees again. Rack laughed. "That all you've got?" But he didn't see Thorn shake his head. "She hit you while broken," he said. "Imagine what she'd do when she's whole." The other trainees fell silent, their mocking eyes now confused, maybe even unsure. The girl didn't hear them, didn't care. She looked down at her bruised hands, dirt and blood mixing in her palms, and she smiled just a little. That night, Thorn found her sitting alone again, near the fire pit. He dropped a water pouch next to her, sat on the opposite stone. No words passed between them for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "Why me?" Thorn stirred the fire with a stick, sparks rising into the night. "Because everyone else only sees what's missing," he said. "I see what's still burning." She blinked at the flames, letting the warmth reach her skin. Her spirit wasn't healed, not yet, but it no longer felt broken, just rebuilding. It rained the next morning, soft and cold, falling through the cracked roof of the old barracks where the girl slept alone. Water dripped on the floor near her cot, but she didn't notice. Her arm was wrapped tight in bandages, her leg still swollen, yet she sat up before the bell even rang. Outside, the camp was quiet. Mist curling over the rocky hills like ghosts. She moved slowly, her injured foot dragging behind her. Each step sent pain up her side, but she didn't stop. Not. Today, Thorn stood near the training circle, already waiting. He held no weapon this time, just a small box in his hands. When she reached him, soaked to the skin and shivering, he didn't say a word. Instead, he opened the box and pulled out a strange gloved dark metal, thin wires, glowing softly at the joints. He held it toward her. "What's that?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Help," he replied. She blinked, then slowly reached for it. It wrapped over her weak arm like a second skin. She felt warmth travel into her fingers. And for the first time, her grip tightened without shaking. Thorn nodded once. Now train. He moved toward the center. But today, he didn't strike first. He just stood still, arms behind his back. The girl stepped forward, holding the staff with new strength. She swung carefully, testing balance. Breathing deeper, her movements were clumsy but stronger. More controlled, she circled him, waiting for a chance. "Why do you wait?" he asked, his voice calm. "I don't want to lose again," she said softly. "Then you'll never win." He answered and suddenly stepped forward with speed. His arm moved like lightning, and the stick in his hand nearly swept her off her feet. But this time she jumped not far. Not clean, but just enough. The staff missed her, barely. And for the first time, she countered. Her pole struck his side with a dull thud. He smiled, very faintly, then backed away, better, from the edges of the field. Other trainees had begun to gather again. No one spoke, but eyes followed every movement she made. Even Rack watched with a frown, no longer laughing. After the session, she collapsed beside the fire pit, gasping for air. Thorn sat down across from her. Just like before, she glanced at him through tangled hair, rain still dripping from her cloak. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, voice stronger now, but still full of doubt. "Why are you helping me?" Thorn stared into the fire, his eyes reflecting the flickering light. Then he said, "I had a teacher once, back when I was nothing." She looked up, curious. "I was broken," he continued. "Weak, angry, always failing. One day, my teacher said something I never forgot. He said, even a cracked blade can still cut. If it's held right." She stayed quiet, thinking, "You don't need to be perfect," he added. "You just need to stop running from yourself." She nodded slowly, then looked at the glove on her hand. "Did your teacher give you something like this?" "No," he said. Standing up again, he gave me something more painful. A reason that night, after the camp grew dark and silent. She didn't return to her bunk. Instead, she stayed near the fire pit, practicing alone in the rain. Over and over, until her arms burned and her legs threatened to give out. Each swing of the staff was faster than the last. Each movement sharper, more focused. She wasn't strong yet, not truly. But now she had direction. She had questions, too. Not just about herself, but about Thorn. Who was this man who saw strength in her when everyone else saw weakness? What was he trying to prove, and what did it mean? That she now wanted to prove something too. When dawn came, the fire was still glowing faintly, and the girl was still standing. Bruised, tired, soaked but standing, and this time she was ready. To fight again, not because she was forced to, but because she finally believed she could. The fourth week began with a challenge. Not from Thorn, but from the trainees. They had been watching her for days, how she stayed after dark. How she kept getting up, and some of them, especially the ones who had mocked her before, didn't like it. That morning, as she stepped onto the field, still sore from training, a circle had already formed. Rack stood in the center, arms crossed, waiting around him. Others muttered, "She's not ready. She's just pretending. She got lucky." Thorn stood back, silent as always, arms folded. He didn't interfere, not this time. She stopped at the edge, unsure. Then Rack pointed at her, his voice loud. "If you think you belong here, prove it." She looked at Thorn, hoping for a sign, but he only gave a single nod. It was enough. She limped forward, heart pounding. Staff in hand, the circle of trainees backed away, giving space, giving silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. Rack came at her fast, swinging with force. No hesitation, she ducked, too slow to block, and took the hit across her side. She fell hard. The world spinning for a second, but she didn't stay down. She rolled to her feet, breath ragged. This time, when Rack charged again, she struck first. Her staff hit his knee, not strong enough to stop him, but enough to slow. They moved around the ring. Her dodging, him chasing, he was faster, heavier, crueler. But she was sharper now, not just reacting, thinking. She waited for the pattern. And when it came to wide swings followed by a downward strike, she stepped in close instead of back. Her staff jabbed forward, striking his chest, then his wrist. The wooden weapon fell from his hand. Rack growled, reaching to grab her. But she twisted away and hit his leg again. He stumbled, and the crowd gasped. No one laughed this time. Rack swung his fist blindly, but it missed her shoulder by inches. She spun and struck his back with a thud, sending him to one knee. Then she stepped back, breathing hard, her weapon pointed down. "I don't want to break you," she said softly, "but I won't let you break me either." Rack looked up at her, not with hate, but something like surprise. He stayed down. Chest rising and falling, the circle stayed quiet until Thorn stepped forward. "Enough," he said, his voice steady. "The fight is done." The trainees parted slowly, whispers following her as she walked out of the ring. But this time, they were not cruel. Some looked at her with respect, others with curiosity. Later, that evening, as she cleaned her wounds near the water barrels, one of the younger trainees approached. He was barely older than a child. Thin and nervous, he hesitated, then asked, "Can you teach me how to block like that?" She blinked, caught off guard. Then she smiled. "Just a little. I can try." They practiced under the dim lights of the storage shed, using broken sticks and old mats. Others joined quietly, watching from shadows, and slowly something changed. She was no longer just the broken girl in the corner. Now they asked her questions, followed her movements, copied her drills. Thorn saw it all from a distance, saying nothing. But watching closely one night, after training ended, she walked over to him. She held out the glove he had given her weeks ago. "It's yours," she said. "I don't want to depend on it anymore." He didn't take it, just nodded toward her hand. "You earned it." She looked down at the glove, then back at him. "Why did you really choose me?" Thorn tilted his head slightly. "Because you were already fighting," he said. "You just needed to stop doing it alone." Her throat tightened, but she didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, she nodded and walked away. That night, as the campfire flickered low, she sat among others, not outside the circle, but within it. They shared food, stories, even laughter. Her back still hurt, her leg still ached. But her spirit no longer felt like it was dragging behind her. For the first time she belonged, not because someone gave her a place, but because she took it, step by step, blow by blow. It rained, the days grew longer, hotter, the skies above the training camp turning a deep copper red. The wind carried dust and the scent of sweat and effort. But something else floated in the air now: respect. The girl, once ignored and insulted, now trained side by side with the strongest. Her limp was still there. Her body still bore scars. But her movements were sharper, faster. She no longer needed Thorn's glove to grip her weapon. Her hands had grown strong enough. She had become something no one expected. A leader, not by shouting or ordering, but simply by doing what no one else would do, failing and rising, losing and returning, again and again. Thorn watched her from a distance most days. He still trained her, but now she was surrounded by others. Sometimes they copied her moves. Sometimes they asked her for help. Even Rack, who once called her useless, now listened when she spoke. One evening, Dorn called her out before the others. He held something wrapped in a dark cloth. She stepped forward, confused. He unwrapped it slowly, revealing a weapon knot. A wooden staff, but a real blade, light and sharp. She stared at it, unsure. "This is not a reward," he said. "It's responsibility." She took it in her hands. Surprised by the balance, the weight, her fingers closed around the grip like it belonged there. The others clapped, some cheered quietly, but Thorn didn't smile. "Tomorrow," he said, "you'll lead the morning drills." Her heart skipped. Lead? Not assist, not follow, but lead. That night, she couldn't sleep. The blade lay beside her bedroll, silent and cold. She stared at the ceiling of her tent, thinking about everything she used to be, the girl in the corner, silent and weak. Forgotten now, they looked at her differently, but deep down, the same doubts scratched at her chest. What if they were wrong? What if she wasn't ready? At dawn, the sky burned gold. She stepped into the field first, holding the new blade. Not wearing the glove, one by one, the others came. Forming rows without being asked, she stood in front of them. Heart thumping, they waited, quiet, watching. She raised her blade, pointed it forward. "Form up," she said. Her voice not loud, but steady. They obeyed without question. Her steps were measured. Her commands clear. She ran them through the drills Thorn had once used on her. Some fumbled, others hesitated, but she corrected them calmly. Firmly, not with anger, but with belief. Thorn stood by the gate, arms crossed, not interrupting. For the first time, she didn't look to him for approval. She didn't need it after the session. She sat by the fire, exhausted but proud, a younger trainee sat beside her. "How did you do it?" the girl asked, her voice shy. "How did you stop being scared?" The blade rested across her knees, catching the light. She looked down at it, then at her hands. "I didn't stop," she answered. "I just got tired of letting it win." The girl smiled and nodded, as if those words were something she'd remember for a long time. That night, Thorn walked by her tent and stopped at the flap. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow will be harder." She smiled. "You always say that," he shrugged, "and I'm always right." They shared a moment of silence. Then she asked, "Did your teacher give you a sword too?" "No," he said. "He gave me a mirror." She blinked, confused. "A mirror?" "To see what I hated about myself," he said, "until I learned to face it." Then he walked into the night, boots crunching softly on gravel. She looked down at her reflection in the blade. And for the first time, she didn't see a victim or a mistake. She saw someone who had earned her place inch by inch. Breath by breath, she closed her eyes and slept beside the blade, not because she was guarding it, but because it had become a part of her. A part she never thought she'd earn, but now could never let go. The sirens didn't sound until it was too late. The attack came just after midnight. Without warning, explosions shook the camp, fire streaked across the sky, and shadows moved fast between the tents. Most trainees woke in panic, grabbing weapons and running in every direction. But she didn't panic. She was already up, already armed, already moving. She pushed past smoke and flying debris, calling out names. Some were hiding, some frozen, others wounded. The enemy wasn't a full army, just a raiding party, small but brutal, and they knew exactly where to hit. The gate had been breached, guards taken out, supplies already burning. She found Rack bleeding near the training circle, gripping his side. "We're surrounded," he growled. "We can't hold them." She pulled him to cover, breath quick. Then she looked around at the chaos and made a decision, not out of bravery, but because there was no one else giving orders. "Gather the youngest," she said. "Take them through the back ridge. There's a small tunnel." He stared at her, surprised. "You're leading?" "No," she said. "I'm staying." Then she turned and ran toward the flames. Near the command tent, Thorn was fighting 3 raiders at once. His movements were clean and brutal, every strike landing with purpose, but even he looked surprised. When she appeared beside him, her blade flashing in the firelight. "You should be evacuating," he shouted, slamming an attacker to the ground. She blocked a strike with her arm guard and countered. "They're trapping the young ones inside someone. Has to break the line." Thorn narrowed his eyes, then gave a small nod. "Then let's end this quickly." Together, they moved like a storm. She had never fought in a real battle before, not like this. But everything he taught her came alive in her hands. She struck low, moved fast, used her smaller size to slip under armor and around blades. Every time she fell, she got up. Every time she was struck, she struck back harder. The fire burned high behind them, casting shadows across the field. She saw two trainees cornered near the edge of camp and sprinted toward them. An enemy turned, raised a weapon, she screamed, charged, and slammed into him, driving her blade straight through his side. He fell with a groan. The trainees stared at her in awe. "Go!" she gasped. "Run now." By the time dawn began to rise, the camp was quiet again. Bodhi's friend and Foley still in the dust. Smoke drifted above the ruined gates, and the fires were dying down. She walked through the wreckage, limping, her legs soaked with blood. Her blade was broken near the tip. Her left hand swollen, but her eyes were sharp, her face calm. Thorn sat on the ground near a shattered wall. Cleaning a cut above his eye, he looked up as she approached. "Report," he said, half smiling. 6 dead, 13 injured. She said, "But we kept most of the young ones alive." He nodded. "You did well?" She sat beside him, breathing slowly. "I didn't think I'd survive," she said quietly. "Neither." "Did I?" he replied. "But I hoped you would." She looked at him, tired but curious. "You still testing me?" "Always," he said. "Even now." She chuckled once, then winced. "I think I passed. You didn't pass." He said, "You became the test." She didn't understand at first, but then she saw what he meant. She was no longer the weakest, no longer the one learning. Now others would look to her and wonder if they could survive what she just did. Later that morning, when the sun fully broke over the broken camp, she stood before the remaining trainees, holding the broken blade. They stood silently, listening, waiting not out of fear but respect. "We rebuild," she said. "Starting today." No one argued. Some picked up tools. Others started clearing rubble. Even the wounded helped, crawling when they couldn't walk. Thorn stood behind her, arms folded. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. She had become what he always believed she could be. Not perfect, not unbroken, but something better, strong. Through the cracks, unshaken by fire, and no longer invisible. 2 weeks after the attack, the camp was quiet again, but it wasn't the same. The training grounds had changed, so had the people. Tents had been rebuilt, the walls repaired. But it was the eyes of the trainees that showed the truth. They know. Longer looked around for someone to follow. Now they looked toward her. She didn't sit alone anymore. She didn't stand at the back or wait to be called. She walked the field first, spoke when others hesitated, and trained harder than everyone else. Even the new ones, those recently brought in from nearby village, whispered her name with quiet respect. They didn't call her broken. They called her Captain. Thorn watched her from the shadows that morning. His arms crossed as usual, but something was different in his expression. Not pride, exactly something softer, quieter, like peace. He called her over after drills ended. She walked across the field, still favoring her bad leg, but moving with purpose. He didn't speak right away. He just handed her a small cloth pouch. She opened it slowly, revealing a small silver badge inside. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held it up. "What's this?" she asked, even though she already knew. "A symbol," Thorn said, "that you no longer need me." She stared at him, stunned. "You're leaving?" "I was never meant to stay," he said. My job was to teach, yours was to become. The weight of his words sank in deeper than the badge in her palm. She felt something in her chest tighten, not fear, not sadness, but the ache of transformation. She looked around the camp hat, the younger ones training, the older ones rebuilding weapons. The way they moved when she spoke, they were ready. And somehow, so was she. "I don't know if I'm good enough," she whispered. "You never had to be," he replied. "You just had to keep walking forward." They didn't hug or cry. Just one final nod, one last long look, that evening. Thorn left the camp without ceremony, just a shadow disappearing down the valley. No words, no farewell. She stood at the edge of the hill, watching the path long after he vanished from sight. Then she turned back to the camp, her camp, later that night. A soft voice broke the silence. Of the sleeping barracks, one of the smallest trainees, a young girl with nervous eyes, stood in the doorway of her tent. "Captain," the child whispered, "can you show me how to stand when I'm scared?" She sat up slowly, her muscles still sore from morning drills. She reached for her cloak, then nodded. "Come with me." They walked out together. The stars bright overhead, the field lit only by moonlight, and under the same sky where she once stood trembling and unsure, she showed someone else how to stop shaking. Not with strength, but with steady breath, small steps. And belief, that night, while the others slept, another fire was lit. Not just in the training pit, but in the hearts of those who watched from the shadows, too afraid to ask, but now brave enough to hope. The girl who once hid in the corner, the one with the limp and the silent eyes, had become the flame, and that flame was spreading. She still remembered pain. She still felt the old doubt sometimes, especially on cold nights or after long fights, but now she had something stronger than fear. She had purpose. She had others to protect. And she had a story that no one could take from her, one she had written, not with perfect steps, but with every fall, every bruise, every time she stood back up. And deep in the dark sky above her, the stars blinked quietly, as if they, too, remembered the silent one in the corner, who stood now not behind anyone, but ahead, leading the way.